The next person is hard for me to talk about without crying, so I might. I love crying. Puts me in touch with my heart. I may not cry. I don't know. All right, look. How many of you all know that, our world is full of masculinist violence? I mean, can we talk about that for a second? I'm sorry. Do you all not know that there's a lot of masculinist violence in our world that hurts everyone, including men? Yes? Do you know this? Are you with me right now? Okay. So, Wade Meyer is a man who's in the world trying to end masculinist violence. And we need more of him in our world. He is he is the most gentle man I've ever met. His way of being in his body, his way of loving, is a prophetic embodiment in our world. He told me to tell you all, or he told me, don't expect me to get up and be a big old revivalist preacher. His being is revivalist. For me, and for a lot of other women who have experienced sexual violence, being with a man who is gentle and tender can be a prophetic experience, a healing experience. And it's not just women who need that. He's also doing work in the world for LGBTQ people and homeless people, right? So please welcome my best friend, my best man, Wade Meyer.
Thank you. I got a couple of disclaimers. First of all, I've been in California for 10 years. I forgot how you do church in Michigan, so please forgive me for my tie. Realized that when I walked in. The other thing is that I'm going to be mentioning, as you've already heard other folks mention, bodies and what happens to bodies. And a lot of these kinds of things aren't mentioned in churches usually, although I know with Emily as one of your pastors, probably anything I'm going to say has already been said in this space. But just to let you know that I may be talking about stuff that may be hard, and please do what you've got to do to stay present with us. So thinking about things unseen, when I was a kid, we got the JCPenney catalog in the mail. And when I was alone, I would flip to the underwear section because, that's what I had. And I would squint and try to look at what was behind the white cotton in the women's section and in the men's section. I try to figure out what was hidden behind that white cotton. And my brother caught me one time, and he asked me why I was doing that. And I told him about how my body responded when I was doing that. And he said, "Uh-oh." And I knew that was not okay. But I also knew, even though I didn't quite realize it at the time, that there was an excitement about searching for the mystery, about searching for what was hidden, searching for what was unseen. That there was something about that drew me, that made me want to know more. But I grew up in a church where the body was evil, where things that were unseen were evil. The body itself is the seething mass of evil desire that you've got to do everything you can to control, to set rules around, and the things that happen behind closed doors are evil, should not be talked about. They're a danger to your soul. I was a fairly overdramatic little child, but I knew that my soul was in danger because of my body. I grew up in a church where we went to church all day, so we went from 9:30 to 3, and we had lunch. A community member served lunch, and lucky me, I got to be in the kitchen with elderly grandmas who washed the dishes, and they let me dry the dishes. And I looked up to them because I knew that these solid elderly women did not enjoy sex. I knew that despite all the grandchildren and children running around outside, that they were holy because they were solid and didn't enjoy sex. They didn't enjoy their bodies. And so as I got older, I got more angry, and I knew I had to unlearn that idea that my body was evil. And it was really more motivated by angry defiance, really, than by desire at the beginning, because in my mind, there had been so many betrayals already between what I was told was true, what was given to me as truth, and what my reality was, what my experience was, what I knew to be true for myself. And my first sexual experience with another person was in college. She was the first and only woman I had sex with. And by that time, I was an eager and earnest young feminist. I had just seen the vagina monologues. I was bewitched by them. I know you all had vagina monologues here recently. Yes? Yeah, they're amazing. And so, when she invited me to her room, I was determined to find her clitoris. And I failed. She did tell me that it was okay, but I failed. And yet I knew still that queer lesson was the search for things unseen. The search for the thing I couldn't find was part of the key to my healing. And so my queer insight was to keep following that healing. And so I did. But also, when you look at things that are unseen, when you look at things that are hidden, you don't always see only the positive. You also see things that are harsher, but that are no less a part of the keys to healing. So in my feminist classes, in my women's studies classes, I also learned about abuse. I learned about the use of bodies for violence. I learned about the unseen violence that happens in homes, in the backseats of cars, in the bedrooms of children. I learned about the unseen hatred and the unseen violence and prejudice that is buried in the mind. I learned about the unseen factors behind poverty, behind police violence, behind the prison system. And this is where I believe we cannot shrink back. For me, a queer insight is to see, when we see behind the stage, when we look for those things that are unseen, we know that gender expectations can be wrong. We know that sexism can be wrong. We know that colonialism can be wrong, that racism can be wrong. As queer people and those of us who are following that healing, we know about the unseen pleasures of the body. We know about the hidden delights of our love and our love making. We know about writing the script for ourselves. We know about the freedom and joy of consensual sex, whether it's for one afternoon or whether it's for a lifetime. And yet we also know the disappointments. We know about our own fear of inadequacy. We know those lessons that were taught to us that we were not good enough because of who we were. We know about the endless search for somebody else who can soothe our internal shame, trying to find somebody else that can fit in that hole that we feel. We know about the hidden effects of trauma and abuse. We know about the sharp points that drive us from our homes, from our families, from our friends. We have seen sharp divisions between identities, the sharp divisions that exclude people who don't fit the ideal of whatever ideal is dominant. We know the sting of homophobia and transphobia. We know it from the outside, and we know it internally from within. We know the sting of external racism from the outside, and some of us internalize from within. We know the hookup ads that define some bodies and ethnicities as dangerously exotic or as terminally undesirable. We see that. We cannot shrink back from any of that. We cannot shrink back from our power to give and receive pleasure as much as we cannot shrink from our power to take, to hurt, and to abuse. In queer history, there were those of us who desired the orthodoxy. They wanted to fit in. They wanted to get what they were told they deserved before people knew they were queer. And we know the power of that. We know there is a power in legal recognition of our relationships, in the orthodoxy of marriage being recognized by the nation. And yet we also have a vision for the unorthodox. We also know the power of polyamory, of serial monogamy, of grounded relationships that don't have legal recognition. We know the completeness of singlehood. And so we stand at a crossroads when we can see both the orthodox and the unorthodox, where we can see what is seen and given to us and what is unseen and we've discovered. And if we don't shrink back from our own vision and our own insights, if we don't have faith and faith fiercely and open-heartedly in what our bodies and our lovers and our community's bodies tell us about what is unseen, then I think we can begin to know a soul-deep, hard-fought, incomplete, blossoming fullness that I believe God desires for us and God desires with us. And don't get me wrong, our brains get relief from looking away. It's stressful to see the hard stuff and the harsh stuff. But our souls know what tears at us and at our communities. When we are cisgender men and we shrink away from the ways our masculinity hurts women and female-bodied people, when we who are white queer people shrink away from the struggle and the threat and the violence that faces our black and brown siblings every day, when we remain silent from the stories of gender nonconforming people who are absent from our LGBT spaces, our souls take no pleasure, even if our brains can find some pleasure and relief in looking away. And in fact, I think it's our experience, it's our determination, our recognition of that queer insight of where healing can be found, and our determination to hold on to that and follow that that makes us powerful. I think our queer insight is our conviction in the search for the unseen, to look at both what gives us pleasure and what gives us and others pain. That is the key to our healing. Thank you.